Greetings all, and welcome to my fully spoken resume. If we've gone this far, hopefully you've had some interest and you're looking at you digging into a little bit more detail. So I'll try and keep this succinct and relevant and to the point. But I have had to make some notes because there is quite a bit. So just as a brief introduction, the agenda in terms of I'll go through all of the facets as to how I got to here and what was involved. So our agenda is going to be number one, growing up and education. Number two is full employment history. Three, interests. Four, my current location. Five is clubs and committees. Six, health and well-being. And seven, in conclusion. So we will start off. I grew up in Beaumaris, Victoria, which in those days was a middle or an upper middle area, I suppose. It was quite common for the local child to attend local education. I went to Beaumaris Primary School and Beaumaris Secondary, which I enjoyed very much. I was particularly involved in sport. I love sport, but particularly golf from the age of 10, actually. So I did start to play golf when I was very young and competed at schoolboys level and club level and all that sort of stuff. So full employment history. Apologise for my notes. I will need them just as a pricey to remember all of this. So my work career started at MSD, Melbourne Sports Depot, in those days in Southland, close to my home. So Southland's in Cheltenham. It was a great place to work. In total, I worked there 4 years. I'll go through the entire history. It started off very much as a tie kind of scenario for retail salespeople, and I started off selling the sporting goods, of course, that I loved. And as time went on during the 4 years, MSD was taken over by Just Sport. Originally Craig Kimberley, and then taken back by the Reed family. I particularly enjoyed working for the Reeds. It was really, really good. It was a great opportunity for me. I had become store manager at Chadstone store, and running Chadstone with about 5 others, some full time, some part time, was just a wonderful job for a young person. And I learned a whole lot of things. Obviously, the sales element. And stock control, purchasing, cash flows, banking. In those days, there was, of course, lots and lots of cash. Your credit cards had to be individually itemised at the end of the day, which on a 12-hour Friday was quite a bit of work. And then, of course, banked in the night bag, and then the banking redone on the Monday. So a fantastic job. Always indebted to the Reed family. Scotty Reed, rest in peace. I always thought you're a very nice guy. From there, still in sporting goods, I progressed to API trading in the city, 600 Collins Street, which is 600 Collins Street, Melbourne. Now, API was, in sporting goods, I was the buyer as well as the seller. It was really just me. But what had happened when I originally applied, I'd asked for similar money to that I was getting as a store manager at MSD. I just wanted to try something different, and eventually they accepted that, and they put me on. So to do that, I had to be the buyer as well. It was difficult, very difficult, because just being on your own in that department, there was one other retired guy who came in and lots of staff around, but to try and to buy and sell was hard. It took a lot of time. We had a fairly aggressive manager at that of the whole store in those days, Harry, and Harry didn't let you get away with anything. Not that I wanted to get away with anything, but I wanted to buy outside of the spectrum they allowed. So they like to stick to particular brands, and like, for example, I introduced Pro Simon into the golfing element, which was a new brand in those days, and always sold very well in golf and all the other sports, and that had brought me to the attention of Ray Drummond, and I had the chance to go and work with Ray. This is where Ray himself Ray Drummond, rest in peace, terrific man, wonderful man. So I only worked there full-time 2 years, but my relationship with Ray and working there went on 12 years. So I worked 10 years part-time. So 12 years in total. The first 2 years at the city in Elizabeth Street, which, in those days, it was terrific. It was great fun. It was a really good environment. We sold plenty, and I really learned a lot about golf and about cost-effective marketing and how to. No CRM in those days, so you had to be. You need imagination to build your customer base, but Ray had the name, and of course, he had the gear compared to others, and real trailblazer. So it was a really important relationship to me, and I went on to have my own golf shop for a little while that I'll come to later on. A big long relationship with Ray Drummond. But from there, I was interested. I wanted to be a sales representative on the road. That was something I'd always really wanted to do. I liked the idea of, I wanted to go business to business, was the big thing. I was applying for all of these jobs, which was a big deal. You had to write everything out, put together a pack, post it off, all that stuff. So anyway, the hardest part is, of course, starting off, and I was still relatively young. But I got a job with Murfitt, which became Murfitt Regency, but in the beginning Murfitt, which was greeting cards and games predominantly, a few adjunct items within that greeting card market. And again, it was really fantastic opportunity for me. I got to meet predominantly news agents, but you also had grocers, milk bar owners, everything. We still had milk bars in those days. Most of the business in greeting cards was done in the news agency field, and news agents that I were able to service were. I did really well with them. I managed to get a good range of product, increase the facings, and more importantly, I learned a hell of a lot, and that went on for a couple of years. The Murfitt scenario. Now from there, through the golf club, I was a member at Rossdale Golf Club, and ever thankful to this man, Noel Hutley. I never really said thank you to him, and I should have, but he offered me a job at K Topless and Company. Now, Ken Topless, rest in peace again, sadly, a wonderful man. He lived into his 90s, was a war veteran. This was a technical sales representative, and that meant that I was calling on dry cleaners and laundries predominantly. You went to all sorts of places. For example, back in those days, you had the government buildings like Larundel. They all had their own laundries. So it was really mixed, and it was it was a great job, but a terrific job for a young man. And I went along, had great rapport with my clients, met the famous Ron Richards, who had a dry cleaner in those days, and we became really good friends. Very good man, was the coach of Collingwood seconds in those days, I think, or under 19s, but still involved with Collingwood Football Club. Lots of clients. And when I started off, of course, with these chemicals, and I didn't know anything about chemicals, press pads, dry cleaning. I never used a dry cleaner. Back then I couldn't afford it. So I learned how to build that end of the business and how to really work each outlet or account to its highest potential. And there I did really, really well. I don't think they never had anybody previously who'd actually gone out and tried to sell things. So just one example was, I can remember, exchange rate went in our favour. Everything was made overseas. These particular press pad, the common one was the 47R. See, I can still remember that, which fitted the standard press. So the exchange rate went in our favour and the price came down. So, of course, I'd seen this. You had big folios in those days to look up your prices, etc. And the price had gone down. Well, nobody said anything. I just saw it there. The price had gone down. So, of course, I went out into the field and said, right, have I got a deal for you? Look at these press pads. And the more of these pads you bought, they're a big pad for the press. Everybody needs them. So most are prepared to stockpile some. And then, of course, you buy one, you buy three, you buy six, and the lowest price was 9. So I went out and the number of people that took these 9s was just crazy when they came back. So they hadn't told me to do it. I just did it myself. Then they worked out, said, David, how did we sell so many pads? Like, we bought 3 months of pads. We sold out. Oh, well, they're cheaper. So from there, they kept the model stock higher. The good thing about getting that many out there, you don't just lose that business. The person then changes the pad at the right time, which a lot of dry cleaners didn't do. So overall, the end product from the dry cleaner's perspective is going to be produced better, yet you also get the business. So anyway, wonderful job. As I say, rest in peace, Ken Topless. Everybody admired Ken, and very thankful to Noel Hutley. But just at that time, Ken was in his 70s, and he was starting to think about getting out of it. It was a privately owned company. And so I thought, no, I didn't know which way it was going to go, who he was going to sell to or whatever. So I did start applying for some jobs, and I applied for BIC Australia. And I was fortunate to originally be accepted as a territory representative. And BIC was fantastic. They had a base salary, and then you got commission for selling certain things. And so, of course, I was just in that was just awesome for me. So I went out and I sold. It's a great product. You you can sell it with confidence. And when you looked around some of the various, again, predominantly newsagents in those days, but newsagents and grocers, select stationery, you could nearly always improve them, but you just had to put in that work of, first of all, building the rapport, I guess, and then working through the marketing and the strategies, because the product was always going to sell out. But to get the product in a non-consumable like that, you need the product really well placed right in front of the person. So, I forgot the 4-color pen. And you had products like Crystal, 4-color pens, still incredibly popular products. And they're a great company. It's still a great company. It got better there because I was fortunate to be promoted to state sales manager. So as state sales manager of BIC Australia, my full period there was over 9 years. So it was the first job I really stayed for a long time, and I really enjoyed it. As state sales manager, of course, now I'm only doing really major accounts. It was there was a lot of paperwork. We didn't have any PCs. There was one PC in the sales department, and that was only used by administrative officer. So, for example, to get the numbers, you used all of the readouts that basically came from that computer, and you worked through your numbers, but they were always a little bit delayed. So had some terrific wins. I mean, how could you not? It was back. We had of course the writing instruments that you'd all know, and back then not as many imports. So the Crystal pen was one of the biggest selling products in the world. We had the cigarette lighter. Now you have to say a lighter, but the lighter still is the predominant lighter. And there were 3 or 4 lighters, and then a whole different array of packs. And probably I think my biggest ever sale was, certainly the most memorable sale for me was when Child Guard lighters first came out. Now we had the only product, and look, I personally don't smoke, but I understand smokers. We had the only product, one flick, and it was compliant with the Child Guard legislation, but it was a one-click product. So this product was, of course, for smokers. They want to take it, flick it, see that it lights, buy it. It also had double the gas to any of the imports. You can see why it was the market leader. So when that came in, this was a big deal. Safeway then, now Woolworths, and always was Woolworths in other states, but in Victoria, Safeway head office was in Mulgrave. I was fortunate that the buyer changed to James Aylan. And James Aylan I knew from previous, actually smoked cigarettes. I hope for James's sake he's given up. I haven't seen James in a long time. But so when I bought in this, it was a triple stand of all of the three, no blister packs. Up until then, they'd only been selling blister packs. Smokers, like, they want it and they want to flick it. And so I suggested to James that, here's this stand, look at it, isn't it terrific? So if you're concerned about shoplifting, it should be on the back wall with the cigarettes, so the person can, the purchaser can clearly see it, but at the same time, when they get it, they can flick it. And he's just looking at me, listened to my whole pitch, and then right at the end, he said, "David, tell me one thing." I said, "What's that, James?" He said, "Why don't I have this already?" So it was the perfect question. The answer was the previous buyer, and I can understand where he was coming from. He was concerned about theft, and so he wanted every blister pack. Now, so the deal was on these new ones, of course, they all had to be barcoded, which they weren't then. So I had to go back to my boss. We bought every cigarette lighter back in from around Australia, and we just managed to fill James's order, and that was another one of his questions. He said, "Now, continuity of supply, you can supply this, right? It's a lot." Yeah. No problem. No, we'll supply it. Just leave it with me. Anyway, we did. I think we were short about one shipper, and we got that the next week, just to fill the whole thing, to fill that Safeway, now Woolworths order. And when I came out of that, I used to go into that meeting with the previous guy, and I'd be nervous. He was negative, and I was really trying to promote certain areas, and I kept hitting the wall. And so when this change came, it was just giant buzz, and something, even though it's a long time ago, something that I still remember. And we were coming through a time when we were going to international packaging. There was starting to become competition from as in copies, and they were looking at product changing, lifting the price per product, our average sale, because as my old boss always used to say, "David, the thing is, we sell millions and millions of units at Mickey Mouse prices." And if you look at BIC today, that international packaging, which is yellow, if you look for the brand with the little BIC man, that's still in place. That was a great idea. That was Bruno BIC's idea, the son of the Baron, and he lives in the USA. And so he could see the relevance of having an international brand, that when you walked into 7-Eleven in Thailand, it's exactly the same as colour as here in Brisbane, and same all around the world. So anyway, it's really important. We were also changing production from Australian made, sadly, to making the pens overseas, but in Malaysia. We didn't want to go China, and we had Riva pegs. Now Riva pegs since been sold off, I believe, and great product. I mean, it's a humble clothes peg, but I can assure you, terrific product. I won't go into it, or this will go too long. Anyway, people ask, why did I leave? Well, so I was technology. I'd meet these other sales managers, like example, the guy from Coke. Everybody had a notebook computer. I wanted everybody to have a notebook computer. I wanted all of my guys and girls to have mobile phones. Now, mobile phones were expensive in those days, but so I was kind of hitting the wall, and I had started to. A friend of mine was involved in these land projects, subdivisional land. Now, subdivisional land, I'd started to get involved in. I'd never built a house in those days, but I was interested. And he said to me, "Every one of these you sell, you get $600. If you sell 2 a weekend, you can make 50 grand a part-time job. Just do the weekends." Back then, that was a lot of money. I thought, sounds good to me. Put together with my other role, in which I was making good money and had a company car, of course. That was how I originally started in land. So when I left BIC, I straight away went to the company that he had originally formed, which is now still going, and I believe, well, certainly one of the biggest development agents in Australia, which was RPM Real Estate. So my really fortunate start there in land, and I just loved land from moment one, because the people, the people who were selling the homes, I just really gelled with those people. They really felt like they were trying to achieve something. So, and I was fortunate to have a difficult site to start with, and I'll explain why as we go along. But the Brimbank Heights estate, it wasn't a particularly great time for land, and but this site, so it was right up against a railway line, and then right up against the old Nestle factory, and the vendor had the Nestle factory leased to somebody else, and of course these big trucks would come up and down the strip. Now, at the time, I'm living in Frankston, southeast. It took me some time to understand, what it is to be in a city, and why this actually was great land, and it still is. Terrific spot, because now you can walk to the train station and all these other kind of elements that I've since gone to recognise. Now, also the other great thing there was working with, really, I was given carte blanche. RPM were terrific. They really just let me go, let me do my own thing, let me create what I could create. And I was working really direct for the vendor, which was Nick Collum, who worked for Rodney Smorgon. So Nick Collum, again, sadly rest in peace, because we just lost Nick last year or the year before, when he died of a heart attack in Spain. I think it was Spain. Terrific bloke. Real man's man, you could say, and at times some colourful language, but when you work down to the basis of it, when you could let Nick vent and then come and say, Nick, come on, how are we going to do this? And you'd find really the most wonderful guy. And for those who don't know Nick, and many of you probably will know Nick, because Nick was involved in horse racing and was president of the Owners Association. He also used to be president of Footscray Football Club, right at the time when the all of the drama, for those who know AFL, with Ross Oakley and all that kind of stuff. So he understood conflict resolution pretty well, I think, Nick. And Nick, Nick as a vendor was just incredible, because again, he just gave me carte blanche. He'd say, David, I know you're not going to shaft me, but if I can tell you this, if ever you did, it'll only happen once. And of course, I really liked that approach, and so of course I always tried to be the opposite. I always tried to maximise the yield, and we were able to really make this a really good yielding project, but that really predominantly came down to his initial purchase. But what it was about, so the land subdivision at Brimbank Heights, your predominant client is Vietnamese, and so it was making contact with the Vietnamese people, building that network and just letting that network flow. And our marketing strategy had been, Don Fraser came up with this marketing strategy, very good idea. Multiculturalism, living in harmony. And we had all of the flags along the railway line coming down into the entry. Now, the problem was, of course, the flags did cause a lot of trouble. So the living in harmony bit was questioned. So after some various dramas, we came up with a more generic flag that we put down there. So anyway, that was Brimbank Heights. Did it from about stage one was still selling when I came in, and then I sold on the final stage, but it was only about 5 stages from memory, and then somebody else took over the remaining bit of stage 5. So I'm still with RPM at this point, and I had the chance to go to Hillsmead. Now, Hillsmead, it was just the hottest project in the southeast. I don't think there's anything that outsold Hillsmead, and we were coming in to where the the GST had been announced that it was going to happen, but it was a date, and so the market was on fire anyway. So here's this Hills Mead that sells well anyhow, and boom, away we go. Well, we're coming up thinking, oh well, look, when GST and on these sites you do it all on your own. There's no support people. The people, all the people with RPM were just in head office. You don't have 15 people sitting there like you do on a Stockland project. You do it all, anyway, so yeah, look, it was pressure. Yeah, it was big pressure for sure, but it was also great fun. So pre-GST, and we're banging these things out. So I'm saying, well, when GST comes, I'm going to get a little bit of a holiday, because it's going to crunch. Well, so selling 30 plus a month, month in, month out. That's consistent. And really, if you had more, if you had 60, you could have sold 60, but land development doesn't quite work that way. So away we went. When the GST hit, we only had about 3 weeks of gloom. It was either 3 or 4 weeks of gloom, I think. When the GST came in, so here's all these land. It just went from everybody to nobody. And in that 1 month, which was, I think, the worst sales ever, I sold 2 blocks of land, and that was to one guy, and he came from here, from Queensland, and he didn't even know about the GST. And he ended up never building on those blocks. He on sold them. But then the home buyers grant, whang, boom, the home buyers grant. Now I did have a lady who was helping me out, handing out the brochures, a local lady, if I had a contract signing, taking the names, so we could, there was no CRM then, so we'd adapt our own database and work it through the book, and you'd have to literally call everybody and keep contact via mail. And then we had a central mail out that would come out of RPM at the time, which was on a database. So anyway, my lady had asked for the weekend off. She just had a baby. She was going to see her mother. That was all fine. There was nothing happening anyway. And then on the Friday, so it was a 6-day-a-week job. Really, they're all 7-day-a-week jobs when you're on your own, but in theory they're 6 days. Then on the Friday, that was when the home buyers grant was announced. Well, she wasn't there. I'm gone. Oh, geez, I don't know how it's going to be. So I went early. It's just people everywhere. Like you just couldn't get into the office, the small office, to talk to enough people. You could only speak to one at a time. It was just me. In the end, it's just deposit. Now, I think it was within 2 weeks, that $14,000, which was the home grant, was now on the land price. That's how much difference it made. Still kept rolling. It kept rolling the whole time, and Hills Mead just went to higher sales than previous. So it was quite incredible, higher sales than we previously had. Now, when I was doing all of this, it was all got. Now I'm starting to, make some decent money, and some really decent money. I'd been drawn to the attention of a recruiter who'd come to see me, and everything was still on fire. She just sat in the corner. She never actually interviewed me or spoke to me much. She just sat in the corner and watched me work, because that's how busy it was. And she then asked me, would I be interested in doing another subdivision down the road, but direct for the vendor, which was Dennis Family Developments. Now, with subdivisions, of course, the very best time tends to be right at the beginning, as you gain that momentum and push into the later stages. So I was very, very interested. It was in a beautiful spot. In those days, at that time, Cranbourne still had a bit of a stigma, and it had a Cranbourne address, and Hills Mead had a Narre Warren South address. So there was a big advantage to a Narre South address, but Hills Mead was also a lot more expensive at the time. They ended up catching each other, but so there was probably 20 grand difference per allotment. So after a series of interviews with Dennis Family, because Dennis Family, of course, have a full HR department, I think on the third interview, they offered me a contract, which I accepted. And now this was a relationship that went on for a long time. I worked there for 9 years, and really, with the exception of half a street, I sold all the way of the Hunt Club, the Hunt Club estate, and terrific place to work. You made more money per allotment, and you had what we call an appearance fee or retainer. And the job started with the spec homes and the land. So they only ever did about 14 of the spec homes, which I sold, and then they ended up deleting that division in Dennis. So it was all about land. So predominantly about land. I'm making great money because, of course, I was still getting paid for two jobs because Dennis family was on unconditional contract and Hillsmead was on settlement. So while the stages at Hillsmead were settling, I was getting both. And so I thought, well, look, make hay while the sun shines. I set up the display village there at Dennis Family Developments on the front line around our water feature, and away we went. And that was 9 years. Dennis, they focus more on yield than say like the Allen family at Hillsmead, who was the actual vendor. So they will try and arc the prices higher, quicker generally, and they don't often want to sell 30 a month. They would consider 30 a month they've given away too much. So you won't do those kind of numbers, but it still was very, very good. Now, so as I said, 9 years working for Bert Dennis and his family was tremendous. Again, they were all wonderful to me. His son-in-law and his children, and it was a great place to work. But at the end there, we're having arguments over, not me, I wasn't arguing. The company was arguing with the council over Linsell Boulevard, and this Linsell Boulevard thing went on for nearly about a year or so. I went overseas for a while. When I came back, it still wasn't resolved. So Linsell Boulevard, they offered me a deal to stay. They were paying me a lot of money just not to leave, but I felt that it felt like this road was going to take too long to resolve the issues, and I got an option to start a project with the Victorian State Government, Vic Urban, in Dandenong, the Meridian site. Now, if anybody who knows how Vic Urban used to work, basically they'll sell predominantly just slightly under the market. They get a plethora of interest, and you have to try and coordinate all of this. It's predominantly about community design controls, and they do a ballot to sell the allotments. It's not difficult as such from a sales process, but the whole process is quite draining. You've got to keep your CRM right up to date, get everything ready, so that when a ballot comes out, you know that the right people are going to be there, plus community leaders. So this was predominantly Afghani people, Muslim Afghanis was the predominant people. Once again, they were fantastic to me. I made some really good friends. Sometimes I'd ride my bike down there, and it was a good site and a really good site for a couple of years. Now, where the serendipity created itself with that one, that one was difficult, very difficult. But again, I made some good money. Now, my original boss, who I had the interview with there, and I was referred by another staff member, was Jonathan Dunn. And Jonathan Dunn, in that time, had moved over to Australand. And I had built a house in the Sandhurst Club where I was living. And of course, 5 minutes away from me was this site, Cassiana Grove. Now, he rang me up. Jonathan rang me right out of the blue and said, would I be interested in applying for Cassiana Grove? And funnily enough, just that week I'd seen the sign, and I said, hell yeah, absolutely, mate. I'm interested in that. Now, and to put it in perspective, money wise, they paid per allotment 3 times what Dennis paid, and I still made good money with Dennis. So, and the great thing about Australand, well, when I looked at the project for start, it's got a 54 site display village right on the front on the main road. Now, when you're setting up subdivisions, if you're selling a main road for just general housing, obviously you get objections and people say, oh, what about stage 3 and 4 and all of this kind of stuff? Well, you don't want to think about 3 and 4. You want to concentrate on 1 and 2. So, but being a display home, of course, they want the people coming past. They want that traffic. Plus, you get these terrific houses to start your project. And I just looked at it and thought, oh, fantastic. This is great. So the 54 home display village. Now, Jonathan had expressions of interest on all of them. He said, oh, this is the village and here's what I've promised. Well, of those 54, 33% of that changed over the period, but it was still if I say so myself, it was a magnificent village. Now, we didn't do it like a Stockland or a Lend Lease where they try and control everybody through the land and then in. We like to keep it independent, which is a good strategy, because if you've got someone who's just looking at a Porter Davis home, but they're building it, say, in the western suburbs, why do you want them, particularly walking through a southeastern land subdivision sales office? It doesn't really achieve anything, and it balloons your numbers unnecessarily. So everybody who walked into my place, or our place, Australand's site office, at least had some interest. Either they'd been referred or whatever. So the sales were incredibly strong right the way through. In land subdivisions, it's very difficult to do from absolute first block to final block. It doesn't happen too often. So we were 750 allotments, and on Cassiana Grove, I sold first to last. Again, look, a great company to work for. They left me to do it, which is autonomous work. I always use the term cost-effective marketing. So we all know that most marketing dollars are wasted, but it's a matter of knowing which marketing dollars are wasted. So really, to give me carte blanche to run the project. The final site is a 54 home, another 54 medium density site, and again, we sold out all those. That was right down at the end, and then where the land joined, and I remember the vendor next door came to me and said, David, how did you get the housing so good? How did you get such quality housing in here? Well, really, if I'm being honest, a lot of it was the commencement of the village at the front, because people see that and then they want to duplicate it. And so even on the fall affected land, which of course adds to cost, we had great houses. And I'll say, I think of all of the subdivisions I did, driving through Cassiana Grove today is one I'm really proud of, because I think the result for everybody was really good. It's ended up a great site. So credit to Australand, which of course during that time, I should add, was taken over by Frasers. Frasers were just as good, really nothing changed. Fantastic to work for. Now, I also did nearly 10 years here, because what happened from the end of lot 1 to lot 750 at Cassiana, they then wanted me to go and do life in Point Cook. Now, Point Cook was a hell of a long way for me to drive, but boy, what a project. So literally coming into a release, the people would sleep in the office. It was predominantly Chinese at that point. Was not all, but predominantly Chinese. So all the Chinese agents, we didn't pay them, by the way. They only made money on selling the house. So they would bring their clients, Johnny on the spot, hand out the numbers, and we would sell the stages. Now, at the time, I'd said, look, I can't drive to Point Cook. I either got to move there. I didn't really want to move there, or what can we do? So we cut a deal for me to leave, which I was very happy about, and very thankful to Jill Lim, particularly and Sarah at Australand Stroke Frasers, I should say Fraser Property Group now, Frasers, and terrific people to work for. They really, and particularly when I had Jill as my development manager and Sarah took over as state manager, it was fantastic. So anyway, we had made an agreement to end, and of course it was like the never-ending story. It was, oh Dave, can you stay one more month? One more month, one more month. Anyway, 5 months later, we finally got to the end and tried to assist getting someone. I explained to them that they needed two things. They needed somebody on that site there doing admin full time. Now I had none of this, right? So this is an admin person, CRM person, doing all that kind of stuff, coordinating the releases, and one salesperson who lived really nearby. And as I say, if you're talking 7 days, it was 7 days, it was 8 days. So anyway, they did follow that. They did that, and I think they did that till nearly the end of the project. And certainly, I know the salesperson after me did extremely well at Life. So during this period at Australand, again, it spanned nearly 10 years. Lots of sales, lots of marketing experience, lots of networking with people, and all of these kind of elements. While I was making that money, I had, of course, over the years, built some houses, sold some houses, and invested. And what I did from there, so I wanted to try and have a different scenario. I had set up Advantage Property, which was just creating itself to build some of the houses for these Chinese. They hadn't yet brought in the rules, which slowed all of that end of the business at this point. So Advantage and Maloney Investments. So Maloney Investments, which is what I still run, just basically was about, originally I thought about, okay, how could I make $1,000 a month passively just to get to 12,000? And I remember when I ticked off the 12th month, this had been some years prior, and I said, well, how can I make, what if I make $1,000 a week? And so I set about to try and make $1,000 a week, which I increased to 1,500. So the concept was just after the stock market crash of 2007, 2008, and property never corrected during that time. So I thought, I'm going to get this portfolio. I want it to be, to a degree, recession proof. Not completely, because nothing can ever be completely proofed. But I'm going to write a strategy, and I'm going to stick to that strategy no matter what. So it was about so Advantage built some houses. That was all okay. That was easy to run. So then from there I had direct housing of mine, listed REITs, unlisted REITs. So in unlisted REITs, what I would look at would be, say, land subdivision standalone projects. But looking at gaining a consistent yield. So I wanted a yield that would pay ideally monthly, but monthly is of course very difficult. So I'd look for quarterly or bi-yearly to get to an end figure. This was the thing. I then had a little bit of mining because I always held, but not speculative mining. So the written strategy is that nothing is to be speculative, except for that there's one tiny part of the strategy which allows me to invest in something speculative, so long as the correct reasons are provided, and so long as it's not a trade, a buy sell. It's got to be, for example, if you could say find the next REA, this sort, but that's a very small part of it. So it's all around yield. So the strategy is, as I said, listed REITs, unlisted REITs, standalone properties and syndicates, mining, which is basically just Rio Tinto and a little bit of coal, predominantly Rio Tinto, and gaming. So I really like gaming, but really the predominant holding in that was Tabcorp, which has just started to come good with the split of the two divisions. So each year, then the goal is to enhance that yield, and that's basically the last point there of my resume that you'll see down there on the list. So that brings us to the end of that's full employment history right till today. I'll try and keep this brief. I'm looking at the timing there, and I apologise if I've gone too long, but thank you for listening this far. It won't take me too much longer. So just in terms of, I then go to point 3 of the agenda, interests. So golf is still a major interest. I did hurt my arm while I was overseas. I had a little bit of problem with golfing elbow, but golf, I'm very interested in golf still. Really, it's been a lifelong thing. Golf, sport, politics, education and fitness would be my interest. My current location, I'm in Petrie Terrace, Brisbane area. It's a great spot. The sun's shining today, which is nice. Has been cold up here for Brisbane, but great spot to be, and a central location for the work that I want to do in the future. So in terms of, I'm just quickly run through, I've put clubs and committees. So clubs and committees, it's predominantly been golf clubs. So I started at the age of 12 at Brighton Golf Club, and I ended up playing, I played junior and senior pennant for Brighton. Fantastic club, met some incredible people. From there, I went to Rossdale Golf Club. Rossdale's really been my core, still is, although I'm not a member at the moment. I played what was then called minor pennant for Rossdale. I was 16 when Jack Wilson gave me the chance to play number 1 for that side. Still something I'm very proud of. Had a great year that year. Now from there, I lived right near the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Victoria Golf Club. And if you don't know it, look it up online. It's just a place full of history, and I'm now so happy that I did join Victoria for a short time, and I played pennant for Victoria, not Victoria the state, Victoria the golf club, just to be clear, but to play pennant for such a wonderful, wonderful place. And when I went back one time, they still remembered that here, this guy, ex-pennant player and only junior pennant player. I was 17, so I'm not in the senior team. I played number 2 to Mark Johnson, who's now a golf pro, and we had a great. We didn't have the best year. I didn't have my best year either. And in those days, I played golf every day. But the Victoria, what a place, wonderful spot. Sadly, I didn't have the money at the time to keep it going. I'd love to still say I was a member there, but then it wouldn't be much use if I'm up here in Brisbane, would it? So anyway, Victoria and pennant. And then number 4 was Emerald Country Club. Again, I went across really to play pennant. I just loved the competition of the pennant. Probably the most fun I ever had playing pennant was at Emerald. It was terrific. Now, not as good a course, obviously. It's no Victoria, but it was great fun. And towards the end of that period, I started to play okay. So I was starting to think, oh yeah, can I give it one more crack? I think I was 25. And I went back to Rossdale at about 25, and I tried to play one more season, which would have been my last one. No, it must have been 20. You had to be under 25, so I must have been 24 because I could have played one more year. But my putting went in that year, and it was good leading up to the season, but we ended up not having so much of a good season. I thought I was starting to get more distressed from the pennant, and so I decided that I'd start just trying to play for fun, and that's what I've done since then. With BIC, National Office Products Association, and a couple of committees with the golf in there too. 6, health and fitness. I recently saw a property developer up here, and he came and said to me, David, how much do you think I'm worth? And I said, I'm going to guess with a little bit of gearing, you're probably around 300 mil. And he said, well, you're very close. And he said, you know what? I'd swap all of that to be in your situation. And I said, oh, what do you mean? He said, well, you're the right weight and you're active, you're fit. And he said, no, I can't be fit. And he's got rheumatoid arthritis, so he doesn't have the choice. So your health and fitness, look, I've always tried to keep fit. I just think it's great if you feel good. So in terms of anybody wants to give me a medical check, matter of fact, I'd insist, give me a medical check. And do it full on, make it and put in 3 disciplines of a bike ride, walk and a swim, and have me tested afterwards. So I'm 174 centimetres tall and I weigh 67 kilos. And I'm at the moment, I'm trying to get the muscle up a little bit and from the 67 kilos, but retain limited body fat. That's the scenario. So right the way down into conclusion, and you can make of it what you will. And boy, if I ran over time, I do apologise. So if anybody's watched it this far, you've got to have some interest. You've got to be interested. You can see there's a lot of sales and marketing experience, and it's, sales is not just, oh gee, look at this super great pen, it writes. It doesn't work like that. We all know that. Sales is a great deal more, and sales and marketing come together, and they come together with strategy. So anyway, in conclusion, I better keep going. Now, we all know that 50% of every marketing dollar is wasted, as I think I stated before. So I always say, my quality, cost-effective marketing. Let's get ourselves on the right side of the 50% so that we know where we're at. Communication is a skill. So communicate at all levels. I'm quite accustomed to presenting at board level. I'm quite accustomed to doing presentations. It's not a problem for me. Communicating is 90% of it. If you can communicate, not and ah. If you can communicate, if you can break through the barrier to all different people, then your overall result will always be better. That includes all business people, anybody. Dispute resolution. So dispute resolution, I've had people in land threaten to kill me for things that were certainly not my fault. I don't think you can have more than a death threat, can you? And certainly physical violence. But you know what? None of those people, they weren't really upset with me. They knew that I hadn't done anything. They were just venting. So if you have a super aggressive action like that, the best way is to break down the action. So why was there that aggressive tone? Why was that person so damn angry? And when you break down aggressive action with a passive response, and that's not just saying that it's going to work every single time or you're dropping your pants to every demand or anything like that. I'm talking about breaking down the barriers and saying, okay, Steve, now, what's really wrong? And often they'll tell you what's really wrong. I broke up with my wife, I lost my job, and all of these other things. So dispute resolution you need to understand that to be able to, again, break it down to where you can work it. Now, in business strategy, it's amazing how many business people just sail along and think, oh, she'll be right. That's not how it works. You need to have everybody needs a strategy. You need a lifetime strategy, and what I'm doing here is part of my strategy. So with business plans and strategies, I have a skill with strategies. Because strategies aren't about just saying, oh, I have to do this because that works. Strategies is about expanding the thought process. And you need a current strategy, you need an intermediate strategy, and you need a long-term strategy. And you have to be working on the current strategy to get to the long term. That's a skill that I have. So that's things that I can do. I'm not just someone who's standing there talking about a product. That doesn't work. Yield, enhancement, and retention. If you are not making money, then it's hard to survive. You can survive for a while, but you certainly won't be enhancing your circumstances. Yield retention is very important. And increasing it at the right pace is also important. So it's getting yourself into that place. Again, sales. An old boss of mine used to say, David, you haven't made the sale until the client's paid the account. Well, that always stuck with me. So if you're going to make a $100,000 sale, you haven't made a $100,000 sale unless the person's paid you the 100K. That's the reality of life. So that's all part of yield retention. You've got to make money. A business is not there for fun. A business is there. It can be fun, but a business is there to make money. It's there to expand. It's there to have a practical effect on community. There's so many things. So yield is important. CRM. Everybody thinks, he won't know how to use CRM. Quite the reverse. Most people don't use CRM properly. Because I go back to when it was all manual, of course I know how to use CRM. But the better the one you buy, the more things you can do. Now, of course, there's free CRMs, and sometimes for the right kind of business, a news agency or something, that might be fine. A smaller business, sure, you've got to watch expenditure. Again, I'm cost effective all the way through, but significant. So with your CRM, obviously you've got to put the names in to start with, but you've got to try and not just put the name in. You've got to have a little bit more information without harassing the person. What happens if you knew significant days, for example, not date of birth, but if you knew the day of birth, right? Then why wouldn't you have a trigger set to send a handwritten birthday card at the start of each month to every one of the people whose birthday it was that day? That cost is not great when you think of what you would potentially achieve. So also the whole concept of a CRM is not only to retain Dave, it's to retain and expand Dave. So you want retention, but you also want referral. So you ask for a referral. There's nothing wrong with asking for a referral. You just say that's what I want. So why does a Kogan, this kind of thing, work purely online with that circumstance? Because basically they use this whole conclusion list, but to the point of where they annoy you. But obviously it works. So there's a whole lot of reasons why you would want to employ me. As you can see, if you've watched the whole thing, obviously we're very, very close. You've got my phone number. Please give me a call. Thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate your time. And just understand, I've still got a lot to give. I might not be 40, but I've got a lot to give, and I've got longevity to give. I will not hesitate. I will stand there if it's the right position and say, I'll sign for 5 years if that's what you want. So give me a call. Let's get the discussion going regarding synergies and everything else, and where I can help you take it to a new level. And again, thanks for watching. I'd better go because I'm hitting nearly an hour, and I hope it was all relevant to you. So give me a call and we'll talk soon.